Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the invisible and honestly sometimes downright weird psychological forces that are steering your daily decisions. Like, have you ever actually stopped to think about why you do what you do?
Have you ever wondered why you end up buying something you definitely don't need, or why you agree to a massive favor you just don't have time for? It feels like it's entirely your choice, right? But more often than not, someone else is secretly pulling the strings.
So today we're going to completely decode the science of persuasion. We'll be unpacking 7 psychological tricks that actually work on literally anybody. These are the exact powerful tools that compliance professionals, marketers, and even your friends use to get you to say yes without even thinking about it. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover the power of reciprocity, consistency and social proof, scarcity and unfinished business, flaws and the spotlight, and finally, how to defend your mind.
Starting off with Section 1, the power of reciprocity, or the trap of giving and taking.
Let's dive right into this with the concept of reciprocity. This is that deep-seated feeling of obligation you get to return a favor after you've received something first. And let me tell you, it's one of the absolute most potent weapons of influence out there. In pretty much every culture on the planet, when someone gives you something, you instantly feel duty-bound to give them something back. Think about getting a free sample of cheese at the supermarket. Once you accept it and eat it, walking away empty-handed just feels incredibly difficult, doesn't it?
The Hare Krishna Society actually used this exact heavyweight of an unwanted gift completely to their advantage. They used to step right in front of busy travelers at airports and just hand them a flower. The traveler would take it absent-mindedly, realize what happened, and try to give it back, but the solicitor would absolutely refuse. They'd say, "No, it's a gift," and then they'd ask for a donation. And here's the crazy part. Even if the traveler threw that flower in the very first trash can they saw, which, by the way, the solicitors would just fish out and reuse, they almost always pulled out a few dollars to donate, just to clear that nagging psychological debt.
And this deep-seated obligation, it can easily be weaponized into a really sneaky application called the rejection then retreat tactic. Here's exactly how it works. A salesperson offers you this top-of-the-line, super expensive product, and they make a serious attempt to sell it. Naturally, you say no, you reject it. So then they retreat and offer a much cheaper alternative. Because they made what looks like a deliberate concession, your brain feels totally obligated to reciprocate their quote-unquote favor by agreeing to buy the smaller item. It's literally a highly engineered, totally uneven exchange.
Moving on to Section 2, consistency and social proof, or the pressure of the crowd and your own words.
So next up is commitment and consistency. We humans have this incredibly strong, almost stubborn desire to take actions that align with our previous statements or behaviors. Toy manufacturers are actually notorious for exploiting this. What they do is run these massive pre-Christmas ads for a special toy, which gets kids to extract a promise from their parents to buy it. But here's the kicker. The companies intentionally undersupply the toy. So parents go to the store, it's sold out, and they're forced to buy substitute gifts for Christmas. Then, come January, the ads start rolling again. The kids remind their parents of that promise, and simply to remain consistent with that initial commitment, the parents go right back to the store to buy that original toy. Genius, right? But so manipulative.
Now take a look at this comparison because it really highlights how these influence weapons contrast with each other. Reciprocity uses the door-in-the-face technique, which we just saw with the rejection then retreat tactic, to basically scale down from a massive ask. Consistency, on the other hand, relies entirely on the foot-in-the-door technique. This is where a salesperson gets you to agree to a super tiny commitment first, like maybe just answering a quick survey or even filling out an order form in your own handwriting. Once you say that initial small yes, it actually alters your self-image. It builds up momentum so they can then slowly scale up to a much larger request later.
All right, another incredibly powerful force is social proof. This is basically our tendency to look around at the actions and behaviors of everyone else for hints on how we should act, especially when we're in ambiguous situations. It's a tactic so effective that, get this, back in the 1820s, 2 French opera fans literally started a business where they rented out people to sit in the audience and just applaud wildly. I'm not kidding, they actually had specialists who could cry on cue or chuckle loudly at the right moments, all just to manipulate the rest of the crowd into joining in on the appreciation.
But relying on this kind of mental autopilot can be really dangerous. Social proof is manipulated all the time today through staged TV interviews or by influencers who highlight only the glowing reviews while totally ignoring the naysayers. You really have to be careful. Just think about highway driving for a second.
If a few cars mistakenly change lanes at the exact same time, social proof can instantly trigger other drivers to assume there must be a blockage ahead. And in their scramble to blindly follow the crowd, you can actually get a massive chain reaction of accidents.
That brings us to Section 3, Scarcity and Unfinished Business, also known as the anxiety of missing out.
Let's talk about scarcity. This is our natural tendency to assign way more value to items or opportunities simply because they're becoming less available. It is exactly why a salesperson might casually mention they just sold the last TV in stock right as you're standing there looking at the floor model. Suddenly, that TV shoots up in attractiveness, right? You become completely terrified of missing out. And then, wow, if they magically find one in the back warehouse, you are practically guaranteed to buy it right on the spot.
Now, a super bizarre variation of this is something called the Veblen effect. This is a completely economically unfounded demand for extremely expensive luxury goods simply because the price is high. It literally defies basic economics. People, especially younger folks where social status is a huge priority, they actually want a luxury good more simply because it keeps getting more expensive. They're using that massive price tag to show off, and they end up perceiving discounted or cheaper goods as flawed or just tacky.
We also have this fascinating internal quirk called the Zeigarnik effect. This is a psychological phenomenon which basically states that people remember interrupted or unfinished events so much better than completed ones. It was actually discovered back in 1927 when a psychologist noticed this waiter who could perfectly remember a huge party's unpaid orders in absolutely incredible detail. But the very second the bill was settled, poof, he instantly forgot them and moved on to other tasks. Our brains just absolutely obsess over things that are left unresolved. On to Section 4. Flaws in the spotlight and how we're incorrectly perceiving ourselves.
Turning inward for a minute, we encounter what's known as the pratfall effect. We so often think we need to be totally flawless to be liked, right? But in reality, perfection actually keeps people at arm's length. The pratfall effect reveals that if you're generally a highly competent person and you happen to make a clumsy or silly mistake, it instantly makes you cuter, more approachable, and way more relatable. So hey, honestly, don't be afraid to look a little clumsy sometimes. It can totally work to your advantage.
And then there's the spotlight effect. The crucial point to understand here is that we all carry around this slightly paranoid, totally inaccurate belief that others are noticing our mistakes and flaws way more than they actually are. It's the exact reason why you might feel like literally everyone in the room is fiercely judging you if you, say, accidentally forget to put mascara on one eye. But the reality? Almost no one actually notices. We are just not in the spotlight as much as we think we are.
Finally, Section 5, Defending Your Mind and Reclaiming Your Decisions. As our source material beautifully illustrates, the stakes are just way too high to let compliance professionals selectively fudge data or pull strings to manipulate your decisions. You really don't need to live your life on autopilot. You can absolutely take the controls and make a course adjustment.
So how exactly do we fight back? Well, here is your toolkit. First, to neutralize reciprocity, you've got to mentally redefine things like gifts and free samples as what they truly are, sales pitches. That way, you strip away that obligation to buy. To combat social proof, don't just follow the crowd. Actively go out of your way to look for bad reviews and dissenting voices. To clear out the lingering anxiety of that Zeigarnik loop, just finish what you started. Even if you literally just have to imagine an alternative finale in your head, do it to give your brain a rest. And finally, you can combat the Veblen effect by just stopping and asking yourself, wait, am I actually paying for quality here, or am I just paying for the oohs and ahs of the people around me?
Now that you can actually see the invisible strings that are pulling at your behavior, you can finally step out of the shadows. But we've got to leave you with one final, pretty important question to ponder. Which of these 7 hidden psychological tricks are you going to catch yourself falling for today?